Public education is the most important issue confronting our country.
Educating our children to the highest standards possible is absolutely important for the viability of our form of government, for our place in the world.
There's nothing more local than education, so parents care deeply about where their kids go to school and what opportunities they have.
It used to be, oh, you're going to send your kid to a charter school, that sounds really scary and strange, and today it's, oh wow, they're probably getting a better education there.
After the Piton Foundation had really talked me and the Colorado Children's Campaign into thinking charter schools could really be a useful tool for helping kids who were struggling in school, we needed to find a sponsor. And a number of people said that we ought to meet State Senator Bill Owens. And then we talked to Representative John Irwin.
There's not many people who remember who he was. He was a state representative from Loveland, Colorado. He saw in the idea of charter schools the answer for many, many kids. He was the first person to walk around the Capitol talking about charter schools.
Senator Terry Considine was and remains one of my closest friends. He was in the state Senate at the time. He came to me with the concept. Gradually, I started to understand the beauty of having parents and citizens and communities build their own schools rather than have a top-down approach. And so Terry and I introduced the bill in the first year. He was in the Senate, I was in the House, and I got it through the House, and then it failed in the Senate Education Committee by 1 vote. We tried again the next year, and Representative Peggy Kearns introduced the bill in the House.
So I saw charter schools as being part of the larger school system, not something that was outside of the school system, but actually an integral part, but just providing more options for parents and the type of education they wanted for their children.
Only 2 other states had tried anything similar. We didn't have examples to point to. It was so new. No one knew if charter schools would really make a difference. And it put us on the other side of an issue with our traditional friends. To our traditional friends, this seemed like undercutting public education, taking money away from public education.
There's a lot of fear over the charter school law, and so just because it was new, it was revolutionary, it was bold, and so those who were the defenders of the status quo, if you will, they viewed this little bit of choice being introduced into the public school setting as a direct threat to what they had come to be very comfortable with. What really made the difference politically was Roy Romer, the governor of Colorado at the time, because Roy Romer announced early on in the process that if this bill made its way to his desk, he intended to sign it. And when he made that statement, it caused the opponents to be reasonable.
Al Meiklejohn was the senator from Jefferson County, a very fine legislator and very pro-education. He had real concerns about charter schools.
I sat down with him and said, Senator, you know, you have the key vote. What do I need to do to earn your support? He said, I need only 50 schools. I want a limit. He said, I want a limit of 5 years on a school before it has to be rechartered. And I also want to pay these schools 85% per pupil rather than the 100% that other public schools get. Well, I didn't like any of those 3 restrictions, but I accepted all 3 of them in order to pass the bill and start the concept. Went to the floor of the Senate. We won by 1 vote on the standing vote.
I remember sitting in the gallery watching and going, oh no, and let's just say there was a little technical glitch, and we think we picked up a vote on the counter that maybe actually wasn't quite correct, but we took it and had a Charter School Act passed.
It was a big day to those of us who were tracking the bill and who understood it and who were engaged in it, because we understood it to be big. And we understood this law to be bold and dramatic and truly revolutionary. And the fact that we were the 3rd state in the country to pass the charter school law tells you just about, on a national level, about how bold this idea really was.
That's how Colorado charter schools came to our state.
Historically, anybody that has any measure of success in anything or stand on the shoulders of giants before them. And Mr. and Mrs. Michaelis certainly are those type of people that built something from the ground up, starting with nothing.
We were on the hotline where you could get the latest and greatest information on a day-to-day basis to find out what was going on with the charter bill as it was going through the legislature. And so we were working with the superintendent and getting the updates, and when it finally passed, then he called and he said, let's drive up there and get a copy of the bill.
And on the way back, he sat in the back seat and I drove, and Judy was, were you in the back seat or front?
I think the front.
Front. And he helped edit our first draft of our charter. And it was a rudimentary charter because there were no examples.
Academy was really the first one that was conceived by the actual parents and broader community within the district. A number of the parents felt that it was very important to have maybe a little bit more rigorous academic curriculum in place. Ultimately, we came up with the Core Knowledge Foundation's curriculum as a basis.
Everything from how they were organized to how they were governed to the core knowledge curriculum. The basics of the school was replicated again and again and again.
Being first was different, so we had a lot to do that summer. We had to gather the students, we had to put a curriculum together.
Being the first, everything was the first. So dealing with the district, trying to get that charter set up, no one knew what it was, how to do it, anything. So I think everyone was just putting their information in and just trying it.
So we started without any blackboards or whiteboards. We didn't have any of that in place when we started.
We had all these news media people come in.
During the past 4 years, some states have begun experimenting with what they call the charter school.
Aaron is one of 90 students in the Connect School with grades 6, 7, and 8. Classes average under 20, common to most charters, and a big reason parents see these schools as a welcome alternative.
That first year was just incredible. We look back and we are the oldest surviving, not the oldest, but maybe the oldest. We're the only, probably the only surviving initial ones that are still administrators, of the initial movement.
There were no excess public school facilities that were available to us at that point in time. So the parents had to be very creative in trying to figure out, well, where are we going to put this school? So we wound up renovating an old strip mall that was in a shopping center with railroad tracks that backed up to the school, which also posed another safety hazard as well.
They had parent volunteers and teachers that would actually stand behind the building at recess between the children and the railroad tracks to basically separate, okay, you can't go past here while you're playing.
And it was parents that did the drywalling, painting, laying the carpet, doing all of the remodeling of the strip mall. And almost from day one, there was a huge waiting list. And of course, as a year or two progressed, we then found another facility that we had to remodel that was an old grocery store in Castle Rock. Then more recently, they were able to build a total new facility.
There weren't any available buildings in District 70. We ended up landing here, and we're in the heart of a different district.
I guess those efforts were well worth it, and a lot of kids being served in the interim.
Part of the good thing of being the first one, it sort of stunned them. They weren't ready.
Our obligation as the first charter is to make sure we didn't stir the waters too much. 80% of the per pupil funding is what we started with.
We did everything. We didn't have a secretary for the first year or two.
So we've trained the kids, and they still take up part of that as part of their duties. We have kids help clean the rooms. We have vacuum cleaners, and at the time we didn't have a full-time custodian, and we do now.
Not having the startup money and resources and technical assistance in the beginning to start with was a benefit because it really required the creativity to take place on all of the people that were involved. Of course, it's also nice to have startup money and things like that and technical assistance that's available today.
If you'd have asked me when we first started if we'd still be here 20 years later as directors, I would have doubted it. But what happens is the educational environment is changing so much, and we have a vested interest in these kids.
that parents can find the right fit for their student. Could be public, could be charter.
And charter is public, but you know,
Traditional public.
traditional public. And I don't know when we're going to quit. Some Fridays we wonder.
There's a specific history there in which sign language was driven out of deaf education at the turn of the last century and was only grudgingly allowed back in or not allowed back in at all. And so, you know, you talk to the person on the street and say, we're working to start this, in the 1990s, we're working to start this school that'll use sign language in deaf education, and the typical response would be, well, doesn't everybody do that? It was considered pretty radical to suggest that that should be the vehicle for deaf ed.
It took them, I think, 3 full years and 3 full cycles of charter applications to get approved, and there were appeals, and I remember going back to the state capitol. I think we had to go back to the state capitol twice.
The second school that I really worked with was Crestone Charter School, which is down in the San Luis Valley in a very unique community, and a community that's kind of divided between the farm and ranch side of that district and this small area, this small development that attracts a lot of people with just different kinds of interests.
And the school system that was set up here had been there for a very long time. It was a monopoly. And they hadn't made changes in their school for a very long time. And so we started to homeschool a few of our kids. I went down to Alamosa to the library, and the librarian at that time knew that I was homeschooling. And she gave me the documents, probably from Academy, when they first sent out their proposal. She had a copy of it, and she gave it to me along with charter law. And I brought it back, and we started looking through it, going, here's our solution.
It was probably the school and the applicant that met with the strongest, angriest, the most bitter opposition. They had to go to the State Board on Appeal, 3 appeals in those first couple of years. They had to appeal to get open in the first place, and then the district tried to shut them down twice, claiming economic hardship on the district.
The saying comes down, follow the money. So Moffat's a rural school. And Moffat still receives its budget from how many children attend. And so if Crestone Charter School were going to take some of those, a good number, like if I recall maybe 1/3 of these students, what was Moffat going to do?
The initial makeup of Crestone Charter School were almost all kids who were either driving out of district to go to other schools already, or who were in homeschooling. And so it was actually pulling back into the public system parents and families and kids.
And people left the area because of the battle, and yeah, it was a hard time. It was not easy.
And after the first year they were open, the district was trying to close them, and we went through a series of closure battles that eventually resulted in the charter school community asking the electorate to recall the entire school board of the district. And the charter school folks won that political battle, recalled the board, put a new board in place, and since then, the two have kind of worked out their differences.
I never dreamed any of this. I think I just went day to day for so many years that when it was time to cut the ribbon for this new school, it was pretty emotional. And I just found out that there's 12 kids on the waiting list for the high school program.
The district denied our application, and we appealed to the State Board of Education. The State Board agreed with us and remanded back to the district. We then went before the district again, and they denied us again. They had another vote, and they approved us. But this was 5 weeks before the count day. So we had 5 weeks to get a school together, find a location, because we couldn't enter into contract until we had an approval. So there were lots of catch-22s.
Now, our relationship with the district is pretty good. They're very happy with our academic performance, and we still have over 1,000 on our waiting list and siblings that are waiting to get in that can't yet. And so it's been really good.
Charter schools being able to come into Colorado have brought competition to the process. And by bringing competition to the process, what we have seen is a tremendous variety of themes and schools developed that have different approaches to how they deliver education. And I think that's really essential to give parents and students choices.
The sign of an equal education isn't that every school is the same. It's that all children get a chance to get the best education they can.
All charters look totally different. Depending on what their charter is, depending on what they focus in on, they're all going to look totally different.
It really is about choice. It's about parents being able to choose a specific type of education or curriculum or structure or style of a school.
I approached District 11 Superintendent then, Ken Burnley was his name, and introduced him to the idea. He kind of offhand said, well, we have a charter school law in Colorado now, so you can always start one if you'd like. About 3 years later, we were laughing because he said, I told you that, kind of offhandedly. He went out and started a charter school.
The creation of SEVA originally originated with the Teachers Union of Colorado Springs, connected to District 11. A group of them basically got together and had an idea for trying to create a better school that would do a little bit better job of reaching students.
My son is a square peg. He's a different kid. He just isn't a traditional run-of-the-mill person. So the reason we looked at SEVA and charter schools in general was because he kind of got lost in the crowd at public school. He has been allowed to be who he is and accepted as who he is at SEVA by the other students as well as by the staff, which has encouraged him to be able to make a stand for who he is and to know who he is.
It was a big news in Pueblo that a brand new school was opening up, and it was based in the arts and sciences, which was one of the things my mom and dad really wanted for me to be. I'm an artist too, so they wanted me to have that outlet.
We were fortunate enough that when we were developed, the university and the district were trying to work together in creating a charter school. And so the university provided the employees, whereas the district provided a building that they weren't using. So we actually have a traditional school building that is provided by the district.
The structure, the organization of Omar D. Blair is based on a partnership with the Denver Public Schools, the City and County of Denver, and in this case, a charter board.
We chose this school when our children were in primary school because one, it was the location, and two, it was a quality choice. My wife was one of the founding board members of this school, and she helped put together really, literally the bricks and mortar of the school and how it would be designed and ultimately how the flow of students would occur while they were here. And two, really what the principal core curriculum would be like. Sitting around that table, she made a decision that this would be a school we'd like to have our kids attend.
And we serve K2 students, mild, moderate needs. And it's been a wonderful experience. That is now becoming really a standard for all charter schools.
The emergence of networks, of CMOs or school networks has been very prominent. Obviously, DSST and Strive Prep are part of this continually evolving landscape of charters.
Like so much about K-12 education, which I had a lot of people were pointing out I had no background in, quite rightly, when I became superintendent in Denver. I had a lot to learn about charter schools, and nobody was more helpful to me in doing what we were trying to do than, the folks running DSST, the folks running West Denver Prep.
It was like the Wild West, and you were still inventing the rules on a daily basis as to what you could and couldn't do.
And what charter schools has done is dramatically expand the choices that the consumers, our citizens, get to use, so that there are all kinds of different types of schools, longer school days, more intensive language study, science and technology focus. I mean, you look at the incredible array of charter schools, and we're giving our citizens more choice than they could have ever imagined 20 years ago.
The SST now is a charter management organization with 5 campuses, 10 schools, middle and a high school on each campus.
The power of this charter school idea is it taps into a bunch of really kind of core American, values or things that are kind of part of the American psyche. Choice, a bit of competition, certainly an entrepreneurial mindset.
I really was learning more and more about the great need to serve our immigrant community, and then also in Denver, youth that are in transitional housing or homeless. So I started 2 charter schools around the same time, New America School and Academy of Urban Learning in conjunction with Urban Peak. The New America School serves 16 to 21-year-old new immigrant students, helps them learn English, get a high school diploma. We started with 2 campuses. There's now 5 campuses in Colorado and New Mexico.
I've seen our impact on the district. I think we've raised the bar, our standards are high, we can achieve, and then that puts pressure on not only our own district but the surrounding district to try to raise their performance also.
A disruptive innovator can come in and have just a fresh idea that no one else has really thought about, and what in education that gets implemented in charter schools. And I think that's part of why we've seen some of these schools just have incredible success.
So it's actually surpassed the number of kids that go to private school in the state.
At the end of the day, it's about choice. It's about quality choice. And it's about making sure that we respond appropriately in delivering on our obligation to educate every child appropriately in the city. And charter schools are very much a part of that.
We are now anchored in our K-12 system. So we are no longer just a movement. We've anchored ourselves in the K-12 educational system, that we're not going away.
Our job in the charter school movement isn't to try to displace traditional public schools, it's to try to complement them.
I think it's really exceptional what's happening in Colorado. I mean, this isn't working everywhere else. And you're going to have 200 charter schools within a year, working, thriving, doing their best for kids. It's not like that in every state. So Colorado is doing something really right.
I just have tremendous respect for everyone in those first years who fought the battles that we now reap the benefits from.
All of this history predates the birth of their children that are in these schools today. And so I love telling them the story. And once they realize the epic history of the charter school law, we actually had to fight very, very hard to get what we have. And I hope nobody ever forgets that.
I'm very, very thankful for our founding fathers for ACS.
Thank you.
It's unreal to think that this started from a strip mall. And I couldn't thank them enough for what they've done for these students here and what they'll do for students in the future, particularly mine.
Thank you.
Thank you for having a vision for such a good school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really grateful. Thanks for them.